Okay, Paul, the floor is yours.
Marty, thank you. We don't have much time, and Nicolette was a brilliant talk, and I do love the use of the word cognizant, and probably it's the most important thing that we all should be at the moment. I do feel a little bit like the thorn amongst the roses here, and very kind words. I'm just a simple pediatrician practicing in Cape Town, and when I started in practice, vaccination was really easy. You just told parents to pitch up at 6 weeks and get things going, but things have changed dramatically over the last few years, and we can see from this Gallup poll that almost 10% of people have fallen away from being pro-vaccine in the last 19, 20 years. And we all understand that the reasons why that's happening, and we'll go through some of the things, and I'll whip through them if I can have the next slide, Marty. And Nicolette has shown quite clearly that there are a lot of vaccines being used, and this is just the government schedule. And we can see our EPI schedule is quite hectic. There's a lot of vaccines that you have to talk about and try and educate people. And if we go to the next slide, and we can see all the private vaccinations, we can add in a Synfrix, which we might sell as strep pneumoniae, which is conjugated to non-typable Haemophilus and give you some better protection for ear infections, chickenpox, the meningococcal, and I hear today from GSK that they're about to bring out a Men-B vaccine, the MMR. There are a lot of vaccines that are pushed, I suppose, upon patients. And as I said, it's a real mouthful for us to explain it all, but it's something that we really need to do. If we can go to the next slide. Why are people becoming anti-vaxxers? There are lots of reasons. One can go on about social media and Google, etc. But I think it's quite nice to split it into 4 broad categories. One, because there are people that are worth arguing with, and there are people not. And certainly from American studies, the most common reason for not vaccinating is religion. And it's very difficult to counter this. We know that there's certain churches, Scientology, where vaccines are completely not allowed. And one has to, particularly in private, use your time wisely and pick your, I don't want to say fights, but pick the people you think you can make a difference with. Obviously, personal and philosophical beliefs have changed dramatically because there are a lot more people and they talk more. And it's not just pitching up at the clinic. You've Googled it, you've heard on Instagram or other social media platforms about other people's experiences, and it changes your beliefs. And these are people that are worth discussing with. And certainly the last 2 factors, safety concerns, continue to be brought up a lot. And that can be from the dreaded MMR causing autism to, is there alum in the vaccinations, and what are the preservatives going to do to my child? But most importantly, a lot of these patients, particularly the last 2, just want more information. There's a desire for more information. And in fact, in some good American studies, again, they've shown that 30% of people who are hesitant about vaccination are because they just don't feel they have enough information. So those last 2 points are really something that we can act on. What are the fears? Look, obviously, top of the list, 9 times out of 10 in private is autism. And it's amazing how one poorly, or let's be kind, awful article about MMR has haunted us, certainly in private, for decades. Infertility raises its head. It has been raised with the COVID vaccine, HPV. Lots of people talk about infertility and Guillain-Barré syndrome. People are concerned about what chemicals we're putting into their children, and they're concerned about what we're doing to their immune systems. There's a big thing about, well, it's not natural. And, I think Nicolette has said quite clearly, even being exposed to pertussis when you've been vaccinated, it's a good thing. It allows you a little bit of natural boosting in immunity. But we need to emphasize that it may not be natural, but it is important. And I think Nicolette's talk is the most important thing. We need to educate ourselves. There are lots of doctors, not just pediatricians, who don't really know enough about vaccination. And it's really important that we're informed and that we're cognizant of what's happening in the vaccination world. And another factor that, as doctors, we're not always particularly good at is that we need to listen. I love this quote, listen first, remind yourself that not everyone has received scientific training and that social media has given people a false sense of authority and confidence. And certainly I often talk at 2 scientific levels to patients and parents, and I've learned that I can't do this. And most particularly, these 2 points. One, avoid statistics. It doesn't mean anything. 93% versus 99% doesn't mean anything to a parent. And really try and avoid the word but, particularly when you're discussing something with them. Accept their ideas and talk around them. try and tie and say, well, yeah, that's a good point of view, but don't use the word but. And as healthcare professionals, we really do need to stand together. As we know, there's been some anti-COVID sentiments among some of our colleagues, and it really does create a platform for people. If we go on. I really want to emphasize, and we do talk about anti-vaxxers a lot. I think people are vaccine hesitant, and we really do need to emphasize hesitancy allows an opportunity for us to work. That we emphasize to parents what we're trying to prevent, and really importantly, and difficult in the private sector where people are very focused on the individual and their child, empathy needs to be pushed. We need to look after the community. We all need to be vaccinated to save the at-risk patients, particularly in COVID times. But it really is important to push empathy upon people, and particularly upon parents when they're concerned about their child, the individual. If we look at the four important and individual issues, religion is very difficult to persuade, but it is the commonest worldwide belief in terms of why people don't vaccinate. And it often is related to animal components. Viruses are animals too, but particularly fetal material. And it's something that we do need to educate ourselves about, how vaccines are made. And Nicolette has described, obviously the COVID is old technology, and yet people are terrified that it's been rushed through, etc. But religion is very difficult to counter. Personal beliefs, philosophical, again, people want natural. We talk in Cape Town about there's three big curtains, well, three areas and two big curtains. There's the Boerewors curtain, which separates the north and the south, and there's the crystal curtain that separates the vaccinators from the non-vaccinators. People want to be natural, and we need to emphasize that vaccines today are actually a lot safer, a lot purer, and a lot cleaner than they used to be. And that good, healthy eating and living is not going to protect you against disease. Vaccines protect you against some fairly dangerous illnesses. Thanks, Marty. So we need to, we're fighting the media, social media in particular, and word of mouth. People share things, and autism and brain damage are really big concerns for people. And this is where we need to, and we'll talk about in the final slide, deal with people's safety concerns. We need to reassure them that vaccines are safe, that autism is not associated with MMR, and even if this means delaying the vaccination a little. And I'll go again to what Nicolette has said earlier. Timing of vaccines, certainly in the private sector, can make a big difference for people. Thanks. The desire for additional education and information is critical. As I said, 30% of patients feel that they lack the knowledge about vaccinations. And unfortunately, a lot of healthcare professionals, we're busy. Certainly in private, I'm sometimes too busy, and sometimes I don't listen enough. But we really do need to talk about this and allow time for it. And we need to allow questions without judgment, without saying, oh, really, that's, and that but word needs to be left behind. So why do we vaccinate? Next slide, sorry. Obviously, we're trying to prevent life-threatening diseases, damaging diseases. We need to emphasize things like, yes, measles you might recover from, but you might get demyelinating illness 10 years down the line. And as I said earlier, we do need to emphasize that the community continues to benefit, even if the individual benefits against measles or polio vaccine are much less than today than they were certainly even 20 years ago when I started in private practice. It's very difficult to argue risk versus benefits in the modern world. We need to emphasize benefit because the risks have diminished dramatically over time. Thanks. So I'm going to wrap up. It's Wednesday. It's been a short week, and I think we all have heard enough, and I think Nicolette has taught us immensely. I want to emphasize we need to give patients time to talk about it. It's often quite nice when you have a gynae who phones you and says, these people really don't want to do this, and they've got a long birth plan. Just sit down with them before the child's born and talk about it. Give people time. And Nicolette has emphasized we need to get certain vaccines in at a certain timing. But as Europe is doing, Italy starts their vaccination 3 months. A lot of countries started 8 months now, at 8 weeks, excuse me. Timing is really important. And saying to patients, well, look, we can spread them out a little bit more. And we don't have to do them all on the same day. Certainly in the private sector, where people want options, you can safely advise them, and it feels like they're being empowered. So saying start at 8 weeks, and we'll do the Prevnar separate from the 6 and 1, 4 weeks apart, allows people some, empowerment. Often, and talking about environments, Nicolette mentioned, I often offer to do the vaccinations myself. That will give them some safety, security that I'm doing it versus the clinic. Though, let me tell you, most of the sisters are a lot better injecting than I am. And we do need to emphasize which are the most important vaccines. Obviously, measles, it's dangerous, it's deadly, and outbreaks can be devastating. And in patients who don't want to vaccinate or hesitant, you really want to emphasize the most important vaccines. And look, I'm going to end off now and just say, really, we shouldn't be pushing people around. We should be nudging, we should be helping them, and we should be informing them.